Few horror films are as relentlessly terrifying as John Carpenter's The Thing. Released in 1982, this masterpiece of practical effects and paranoid horror was initially dismissed by critics and audiences alike. But today, it's considered one of the greatest horror films ever made. I'm diving deep into 12 mind-blowing facts about this frozen nightmare that will change how you see this classic. 1. The Thing was a massive commercial failure, earning only $19 million against its $15 million budget. It opened the same weekend as E.T., and audiences weren't ready for Carpenter's bleak, nihilistic vision of alien horror. Critics absolutely savaged it. The New York Times called it instant junk, and Stephen King himself called it a poor excuse for a gross-out film. How wrong they were. 2. That famous opening scene where MacReady plays chess against a computer? Kurt Russell is actually losing to a real 1970s chess program called Chess Challenger. When he pours whiskey into the machine, that was Russell's genuine frustration with technology. Carpenter said that he wanted to establish MacReady as someone who doesn't like losing to machines. Considering what happens later with the blood test, that's pretty brilliant foreshadowing. 3. The dog in the film was played by a half-wolf, half-husky named Jed. Animal trainers said Jed was perfect because he naturally looked suspicious and untrustworthy, exactly what the role needed. Here's the crazy part. Jed was so good at looking menacing that the crew was actually nervous around him, even though he was completely harmless. That natural unease you see from the actors, some of that was real. 4. The legendary special effects were created by Rob Bottin, who was only 22 years old. He worked 7 days a week for over a year, often sleeping in his workshop. The stress was so intense that he was hospitalized for exhaustion during production. Bottin created effects that are still jaw-dropping 40 years later. That chestburster scene, the kennel transformation, pure practical magic that puts most CGI to shame. 5. The famous blood test scene used a clever trick. The blood was actually a mixture of cream of mushroom soup and red food coloring. When the hot wire touched Palmer's blood, a small explosive charge made it jump. David Clennon, who played Palmer, didn't know exactly when his blood would react. That genuine shock and terror on his face when the blood jumps, that's a real reaction to a perfectly timed special effect. 6. Cinematographer Dean Cundy used a technique called mood lighting throughout the film. Notice how characters' faces are often half lit? This created constant visual uncertainty about who could be trusted. Cundy also used different colored lighting for different areas of the base. The rec room was warm and orange, the lab was cold and blue. It subconsciously told the audience which spaces were safe and which weren't. 7. Carpenter shot multiple endings. In one version, MacReady was definitely human. In another, he was clearly the Thing. The final ambiguous ending where we never know for sure was actually the studio's choice. That ambiguity is perfect though. The whole film is about paranoia and uncertainty. So an unclear ending was the only way to maintain that tension even after the credits roll. Listen to what Carpenter answers Stephen Colbert when asked how he could find out the ending. He asked, in other words, is there an actual answer to the question, is Childs the Thing?
In other words, is there an actual answer to the question, is Childs the Thing?
There's an absolute answer to that question. I do know the answer.
And then Stephen Colbert asked, can I figure out the answer by merely watching the film? See what Carpenter says.
If you watch it really carefully and you send me a check in the mail, I will tell you.
I thought that answer was hilarious. I really thought Carpenter was going to tell Stephen the answer. 8. Carpenter deliberately made fire the primary weapon because he wanted something primitive and brutal. He said modern weapons felt too clean and technological for a story about primal survival horror. There's something deeply unsettling about using fire as a weapon. It's destructive, but also purifying, which perfectly matches the theme of destroying something evil that's hiding in plain sight. 9. Wilford Brimley's character Blair goes from rational scientist to paranoid destroyer to final monster. Brimley said he based Blair's breakdown on real accounts of Antarctic isolation psychosis. The scariest part about Blair isn't when he becomes the thing, it's watching a logical man slowly lose his grip on reality. Brimley played that descent into madness perfectly. 10. The alien spaceship buried in the ice was designed to look ancient and organic. Production designer John Lloyd wanted it to feel like it had been growing underground for thousands of years, not just sitting there. The ship's interior was built to be deliberately confusing and non-human. Notice how there are no right angles or familiar shapes. It's supposed to feel completely alien to human understanding. 11. Carpenter was going through a difficult divorce all throughout production, and he channeled his feelings of isolation and paranoia directly into the film. He said The Thing was his most personal movie, even though it's about alien monsters. You can feel that personal darkness in every frame. The sense of being unable to trust anyone, of relationships falling apart. It's all there beneath the horror and sci-fi elements. 12. The Thing's influence is everywhere in modern horror and sci-fi. From video games like Dead Space to TV shows like Stranger Things, creators are still borrowing Carpenter's paranoid atmosphere and practical effects philosophy. The 2011 prequel tried to recapture this magic with CGI, but it proved what fans already knew. There's no substitute for practical effects and genuine filmmaking craftsmanship. Which fact surprised you the most? And here's a question for the comments. Do you think MacReady or Childs is the thing at the end? Let me know your theory below. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. I've got more movie facts and videos coming your way. So trust me, you won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows of cinema history.